Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. I got my main man, Tom Myers, with me, and we are excited. Boy, just late last week, we found out that there was a double homicide that was solved in Broward County, that's South Florida, in the Hollywood area. And that's especially near and dear to our hearts for multiple reasons, and especially because Tom grew up there. And so Tom has a real specific insight as to the area and everything, and we're going to get into that. But incredible case, 1975, two young girls that had just finished 8th grade, about 14 years old, had been murdered and found the next day. And absolute tragic case. But there's a ton of stuff that goes into this. And amazingly, Broward County, the Broward County Sheriff's Office, these guys are cutting edge on a lot of different things. And they also made a really awesome video of this. And we're going to take some snippets out of this video and narrate on them and talk about them. But first of all, I have to thank all of you for listening, for subscribing. And please, if you haven't subscribed, just hit that button, hit that subscribe button and the bell so that you never miss an episode. And there's lots of episodes. We have almost 250 episodes now. So if you need to catch up and go back and see some of those episodes, I mean, we've covered a lot of really incredible cases and interviews in the past. So please subscribe and share these episodes with your friends and family. So, and one other just kind of admin note, I don't have skin cancer on my forehead. I was walking just on Thursday, I think I was walking through this house that was being built, and so planted my face full blown into a board, and that's what that is. So, Tom, I leave those conferences that we were at last week, and boy, it must have been a little distracted because lost my head and just whacked it. It almost dang near knocked me out. So. But I'm sure you've never done anything like that, right?
No problem. Well, not today yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's get into this case, man. This is absolutely just incredible. So what, as a whole, when you saw the announcement that Broward County was releasing this video and the news that this case was solved, what was your initial reaction?
Oh my gosh, big thumbs up to BSO. My old agency before I was in the FBI was swept into them, and always was kind of a goal of mine to work for them because their crime scene unit is so good and it's still one of the best in the country, if not the best. So we saw our friend Rob Caceres on film, and we're going to see him today. And he's a Jedi Knight with this MVAC machine. And this case, looking through it, you can tell I'm almost still stunned talking about it. Is either our second or third oldest MVAC, 48 years later. And a big stunner. And the case hinges right on where a bunch of different jurisdictions come together and adds some confusion to it. So I kind of pride myself on being a student of history, film, and crime, and knowing all that stuff. And if it had been in Hollywood, I probably would have known that because I have that lineage there. But because it's just 100 feet, maybe 50 feet across the street on Sterling Road, it falls into that Fort Lauderdale mailing address, which was then Dania Beach, which I believe, and it was a contract city or became later Broward Sheriff's Office. We fall into that degradation of the investigation. So I'm trying to parse it all out and figure out the exact address, even all these years later, and having that knowledge and work those areas. So there where some of the confusion came. So it's amazing they got this thing together, but it's like a thunderbolt, lightning strike how this thing was solved. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. These guys, to be able to go back to a case that's almost 50 years old, from 1975. I mean, I was 8 years old then. And the incredible thing about, I mean, everybody needs to understand that DNA wasn't even, I mean, fingerprinting was being perfected back then, but it's still, there's a lot of techniques that have developed just in fingerprinting, but DNA wasn't even thought about. I mean, this is a good 20 years before DNA is even on the scene. So, incredible that the detectives and the investigators, whoever actually worked that crime scene and the victims, had the foresight to collect the evidence that they did to be able to actually preserve it properly. And that's a key area, especially in areas like Florida, anywhere in the South. Anywhere east of the Mississippi, really. Let me backtrack. East of the Rocky Mountains, man. It's so humid that if you don't package evidence correctly, then mold will grow on that. And as many of you know, mold is an inhibitor of the DNA process. So if evidence is destroyed if it gets moldy, then a lot of times, then even if they try to get a DNA profile, they can't. It won't produce anything. So kudos to those guys way back in 1975 to collect all this evidence correctly. So again, double homicide, 14-year-old girls. They get into this white van from just a park bench that they were sitting there, and were never seen alive again. So let's go to the video. And again, this is the Broward Sheriff's Office video. It's Open and Unsolved, episode 6 is what we're going to be covering. So here we go. Let's go to the video.
On a June day in 1975, Barbara Schreiber and Darlene Zetterauer walked along a street in their Hollywood neighborhood. The girls were 14 years old and inseparable. As they lingered on a bench on the corner of Sterling Road and Northwest 40th Street, neither of them, nor anyone who knew them, could imagine they would not live to see their 15th birthdays.
I think this was the beginning of the ending of their life.
Gail Cavaco was friends with Darlene Zetterauer. They grew up together. She remembers Darlene and Barbara enjoying carefree summer days before they began high school. That particular day, a white van pulled up near the bench, and it appears the girls who frequently hitchhiked willingly climbed inside. Once that van door closed, Barbara and Darlene would never be seen alive again.
The why, I don't think we'll ever know why. I think the person that did this was just a sick person.
All right. So, Tom, so first of all, 1975, if anybody remembers back then, it was just such a more of a carefree time. And, hitchhiking was pretty common. It's just there wasn't as much of an awareness of the dangers that, I'm sure the dangers weren't quite as prevalent as they are now, but nobody really cared as much. So your thoughts on the Hollywood area back in 1975? You were like 30 back then, right?
No, not quite. A little older than you. How about that? Yeah. I know the area well, and it changed dramatically with the kidnap and murder of Adam Walsh took place in 1980, if I recall correctly. So we're 5 years before that at least. And I have family on law enforcement, so I know the area really well, friends in it, and a lot of contacts that came later on as I got older. But in between that area right now, to this day, it's confusing to everybody. They mention on the video that it's 40th Avenue and Sterling Road. Well, as I said before, about 50 feet difference. If you drop into Hollywood, it actually becomes 56th Avenue. So it confuses everybody. And I can just imagine, okay, let's back up a second. We know what happened, and when the girls disappeared, we have at least 3 crime scenes. We have crime scene where they're found, where they departed from, and the autopsy itself. And then there could be anything else that's found, but we know those 3 are the immediate crime scenes. So that area just we're speaking about where Gail is referring to, where she saw the white van pick them up and disappear off the face of the earth. that's a crime scene right there. But like I said, the confusion arises because you don't own those, meaning that agency doesn't know all the witnesses. They're not intimately familiar with all the people who are good witnesses, who are friendly to the police, who are problem children. And back in those days, it was done with 3x5 cards. You knew the people who were suspect pedophiles and things like that. And of course, they ended up in NCIC as well. But you had that informal. But if you have multiple agencies, it just degrades the entire investigation. So they're already hamstrung at the onset here. What worked well, and we're going to learn in a second, and what helped was their bodies were found very quickly. So with that, I'll kick it back over to you, Jared.
Yeah. Well, and also it's important to note that there's a lot of kind of salacious material out there about these girls. And yes, they were carefree. They were, not living, perfect lives, but what 14-year-old does, right? And but most importantly, especially we have to remember that this is 1975. We can't judge what happened from 2023 standards. And it was just a different time back then. And, these girls were just out having fun, carefree, and they made the mistake of getting in the wrong vehicle. And that's the bottom line. So it's one of those where it's a tragedy, but, there's lots of lessons learned here. But most importantly, again, kudos to all the Broward County investigators that just never gave up on this case, because it's ultimately, it's just absolutely incredible to think back in 1975. Like you said, they were working with Rolodexes and 3x5 index cards, and computers didn't even really exist back then. And so they're working, they're writing it down. They're trying to work back and forth on county lines and city lines and multiple agencies. And, it's a double homicide, and these girls were brutally murdered after being raped. And, all right, let's go to the next section of the video.
This case, I think, has gone unsolved for so many years because the girls just vanished.
Broward Sheriff's Office cold case homicide detective Andrew Giannino has spent 2 years trying to untangle the mystery of how Barbara and Darlene began a seemingly ordinary day in 1975 in Hollywood, and by nightfall were murdered and left in an area off of US 27 on the edge of the Everglades known as Andytown.
All right, Tom, what do you know about Andytown?
Oh, Andytown, probably the precursor for the film Porky's, the foreign Porky's. It wasn't like Porky's. It was a small place, but it was a gas station and had a bar in there and a package store and a few other sundries too. And I think it was built right after World War II. A guy named Andy Poulos owned it, and then I think one of his relatives inherited after he passed away shortly before these girls murdered. But it was the middle of nowhere, and I probably wouldn't even know it, except my dad worked security for Florida Power and Light. And he would go out, and the substation was right across the street on the east side of the road. And he would check those areas, and he would inspect them and make sure that there was, because that was one of the big grid systems out that way. So the Andytown substation. Otherwise, it's kind of lost to history. It still ends up on the map for some reason, and it's a very, very remote area out there at the time. There was really no reason, unless you're going north and south on 27, which takes you just to Lake Okeechobee, which is extremely desolate. So very few people traveled it back in those days. That was the end of the world. There was no I-75. It precedes it. So it was a 2-lane road. Actually, it may have been 4, but you could disappear off that pretty easily. And there were other girls dumped there, and unless you see a set of headlights coming, it's you're not going to get caught. West of Andytown, it's just a big, vast expanse of Everglades, and that's not. It's like a wheat field with water. I guess it's the best way to describe that, Everglades. So it's flat and open, and people used to fish out there and used to get some encampments a little bit further out on those, but that was about it. And then very few roads actually went all the way out to 27. That is that north-south boundary, or that roadway. So one was 84, right near where Andytown was. 4 miles north that intersection is where these girls' bodies were dumped. So it's really fortuitous that they were discovered within hours of being murdered, because those biological light processes didn't destroy that evidence that you talked about before. But certainly heat, UV, rain, all sorts of things could have played havoc on that. Any biological material, any DNA that would have been there. And we're talking probably touch DNA, because we know MVAC's involvement. They would have, as a cold case, have worked this with a semen sample that was left behind, and at all accounts don't indicate that's the case. So it was, as Rob shows, touch DNA that happened on this.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And we also have to remember that this is June, the middle of June in Florida. So so let's just take this scenario and talk about how, like you said, how fortuitous it was that they were found the next day by a family that was headed out down that road and going fishing. So if they had been found, say, a day or 2 days after they had actually been found, so from the time of death to when they were found was actually probably less than 24 hours, and most of it was nighttime. So it's going to be cooler. It's still going to be hot in Florida, that time of year. But if they had gone even another 24 hours, what would the decay of the bodies been like?
Yeah, any number of things could have happened there. So I think about 13 hours later is when they were found, in estimation, maybe less than that, maybe down to about 7 in the in-between. So that's a miracle that happened. If they'd thrown them in the water, that would have degraded it. But the animal activity would have started pretty quickly. So the decomp hadn't started real severely yet. And I'm surprised it hadn't, because that's a pretty active animal area. The only thing is that it's so open compared to being further west into the Everglades themselves, which is impossible to get to. It sounds great that you have to get out there on an airboat. Otherwise, there's no getting out to those areas, and it's all contained and canalized and everything like that. But it would have. Easily a month will strip up a deceased person down to a skeleton in Florida, above ground easily, and the animal activity to scatter those bones really quickly. So yeah, 1 day would have done quite a lot to degrade that.
Yeah. So, and also remember this case. Well, you can't really remember because we haven't talked about it yet. But this case was essentially solved because of DNA. Now, something that's really, really critical to understand is that as the body decomposes, you have all of the decomposition, for lack of a better word, it kind of soaks into the clothing, and any kind of touch DNA that would have been from the perpetrators on the outside of the victim's clothing would have been saturated with all of this body decomposition, and so and it seeps into the clothing, and just from specifically on the MVAC, but I'm sure swabbing is dramatically affected by this as well. Is that when you try to extract or try to collect the surface DNA, which would have been from the perpetrators, like grabbing the victims, say they wanted to move the victims out of the van where supposedly that's where they were murdered, grab them by the ankles or whatever, that body decomposition would saturate into the clothing, and it makes it virtually impossible to collect the touch DNA that we're talking about. So it's like you said, boy, even though this took almost 50 years to solve, the fact that they were found so quickly is just an absolute miracle, and that's a critical part of this whole scenario. And I'm sure as the cold case detectives looked at this and they looked at the evidence, they're saying, what are the chances that we can get this? And that's a major part of it. Sometimes we wonder why cases can't get solved quicker. Well, a lot of times it's because the evidence just will not reveal, the perpetrator. And part of it is because of, like I said, decomposition, just animal activity, water is a huge problem. Sunlight, it all starts breaking down the DNA. And when you're looking at DNA, and that's the primary way that we solve cold cases nowadays. So just absolutely incredible. So, okay, let's go back to the video. Again, this video is incredible. If you haven't seen it, you'll see the majority of it here with us, but you can also go just to Broward Sheriff's Office, their web or their YouTube channel, and see this entire thing. So, okay, here's the next section.
They never heard from again. There's no technology to trace. It was a very hard case to solve from the onset.
For decades, homicide detectives have stared into the eyes of these two children who had recently completed 8th grade and wondered who could have treated them with such indifference and violence.
I think what made this case live on and resonate with investigators is the innocence of these kids. I mean, they were your neighbor. They were your daughter. They were your sister.
When the murders happened, there were newspaper articles and media coverage. A year and a half later, the case turned cold. It has now become Detective Giannino's mission to solve this case.
I was supposed to retire in June of last year. As we progressed in the investigation and followed different leads, I just couldn't leave it for somebody else to pick up on. I've just got too much of my own life invested in it.
That investment is paying off. When BSO's Cold Case Homicide Unit first began working on this video in early 2023, there were piles of reports, dozens of crime scene photos, several boxes of evidence, and Barbara and Darlene's clothing. But there were few tangible leads in the murders.
All right, man. So the first thing I want to ask you is, based on your experience and working with other investigators, especially when they're working cold cases. I mean, it's another thing working an active case, it's just seeing the violence. And it's amazing to me that the longer that we do this, just when you look at some of the violence that humans can do to other humans, it's just, you think you've seen it all, and then it just gets worse. And so when the detective was talking about, it became personal to him. So based on your experience in working with all these investigators, how does that affect each one of these detectives and CSIs that work these cases?
Yeah, VT, vicarious trauma, and it takes a part of them. And I've known guys gone to their graves still working this in retirement. It's really well epitomized in the movie The Pledge with Jack Nicholson. And not to give away the plot, but what happens in these, you begin to live it, and it's hard to put it away, and it stays with you. So it's tough on those investigators, and it's really tough on the ones that really care and they work hard to solve this. And it's a very traumatic process for them. And then they have a love-hate relationship because they can't put this down. They're criticized often from it. Actually, put this down, meaning solve the case. They're criticized for it. They get to hear things in the press like botch the case or Keystone Cops or things like that. And they're working with the resources they're given. If we show the graphic where that patchwork quilt of county properties lay out, it's almost impossible to figure out how this Rorschach ink blot of map is laid out, and you're not even allowed to go in the other jurisdiction really without having some kind of authority or coordinate with other agencies, and they have casework to do. Just even that just degrades and erodes that investigation and makes it very, very difficult. And of course, everybody's trying to solve things. They work together very well back then, but you still have problems. Just things back in those days, you didn't have email. You couldn't even make long distance phone calls unless you logged that in accordingly. So these things all go to degrading that and how tough it is on somebody. And you do what you can do with the resources. A couple of things that he mentioned about nothing to track back then. In those days, the only thing that you had was vehicle registration. So surely they went back and they contacted Tallahassee and they saw every white van they could and tried to find every lead possible. But how many white vans existed back in Broward County back in the day? And they were probably looking at a very tight circle from where the girls disappeared from. That was probably the competent part of the investigation. But if it was Dania working this or in conjunction with Broward Sheriff's Office, I don't know. But that's the only way you could have databased that. Another thing they mentioned, is after a year and a half, they're forgotten. Well, the only reason that lasted a year and a half was because other girls were murdered, and the writers of the day were trying to put together stories to make linkage and get public awareness out on it. But that story falls apart. Remember, this is the golden age of serial killers, although I would doubt this doesn't seem to be a serial killer. This seems to be something other than the classic serial killer model there. The girls were shot. So what you're really talking about is a news cycle of about 7 days, more like 5, and then they're forgotten, had it not be for this other. So that's it. And if you really want to understand what that is, watch the film Memories of Murder, that Korean film, and it's tough to watch because it's in Korean language and there's different, but that's what those cops and detectives live with, and they're born into it and they work, and those are what is described in The Wire as real police. I mean, those guys are really my heroes, and I tried to emulate and learn every bit I could from them. And yeah, they have a hard life, and that's why so many of them die young. That's why so many of them crawl into a bottle, and unfortunately why so many of them end their lives by their own choice, is they have to live with this stuff. And it doesn't help when people are criticizing me outside. So it's a tough charter, but that's the life we all chose.
And yeah, which is why I so adamantly defend just about every investigator. You know, there's always going to be some bad apples, but I'll tell you, for the most part, people in law enforcement, man, they're just a cut above. I mean, they only do it because they care about the society. I mean, again, that's taking out the outliers and the people that do it for the wrong reasons, but those are few and far between. I mean, out of what is there, 800,000 law enforcement officials now, going all the way from the traffic cops all the way up to, chief of police and sheriffs. But those guys, they do it for the right reasons, and especially detectives, they get into it and they do it because they care and they want to solve the problems, and they're challenged by those, putting that puzzle together, and especially when they don't know what it actually looks like. But kudos to all of them, because there's a price to pay for, getting involved in the depravity of society. And the guys that they are dealing with are either just complete lowlifes, or they're people having the worst day of their lives. And either way, it's the opportunities to have, positive moments in an investigation like this only comes when it's solved. They get a breakthrough, and then there's some hope and there's some positive moments there. But man, and this is just one case. The cases just go on and on and on, and until humans completely changed, I don't know which is going to maybe when Christ comes, but short of that, we are going to have human depravity, and it's not just the victims and the victims' families and the immediate community. It also affects these cops, and these guys are heroes from start to finish. So I hope, just based on what we're talking about right now, if you have a chance to, go thank a cop or buy him lunch or whatever, I hope all of you that are listening to us or watching us on YouTube or wherever, I hope you, go out of your way to thank a cop today. So, okay, let's go back to the video. There's a couple more, obviously some more sections that we want to get to, because again, this video is only about 7 minutes, but it is just absolutely packed with information. So, okay, here we go.
Early 2023, there were piles of reports, dozens of crime scene photos, several boxes of evidence, and Barbara and Darlene's clothing. But there were few tangible leads in the murders. However, the results of DNA testing recently unlocked new clues.
The preservation of evidence is super important, even going back almost 50 years, because a lot of the evidence sometimes deteriorates.
BSO crime scene detective Roberto Caceres tested Darlene's clothing. He separated DNA trapped in the garment from the clothing fibers.
And this is the end result. Almost 50 years of this DNA on this case.
While Detective Giannino awaited the results of those lab tests, he continued.
All right. So, as the president of MVAC Systems, I'm telling you, that's by far the best section. Man, I first of all, kudos to our good friend Rob Caceres and working for BSO, the crime scene unit there. And he's also a wizard with the MVAC and, does a lot of, all of them there are great with it, but he seems to be just kind of rising a head and shoulders above, and he's just doing some amazing things. So when you first saw that, Tom, what did you think?
Yeah, Rob is like a samurai with that, because that is not easy. You've got to lay that out, and you've got to use that device without sucking the blood into it, and degrading that sample. And he probably worked around that. So he's very talented with it. And you also notice all the protocols he has. And as we learned recently, they established their own clean room there, DNA room, I think was the colloquial term they used for it. So to sequester that off to keep those samples intact and everything else, bringing back the best thing. So, man, what else do you say? Nothing. This guy's never showed up on the radar. And like a lightning strike, they have a full profile of who this guy is. Now, the mystery is, was he identified through CODIS, or did they do a FIG, forensic investigative genetic genealogy? I would say the former is probably the case right here, because he has an extensive criminal record. And we'll speak a little bit more on the offender on this, but yeah, very exciting to hear it. And it's textbook MVAC work on there.
Absolutely. So any of you investigators that are watching this that may not have access to, just your unit or your department, if you don't have an MVAC yourselves, there are crime labs around. There are other agencies that'll work with you. So if you have a case, and it doesn't matter how old it is, doesn't matter if it's been tested like swabbed before, if it hasn't been MVAC'd, then there's a chance that there's still DNA there that it can collect, because even the FBI has shown that it can collect up to 66 times more even after the swab. So don't think that your case, just because it's been tested especially if it hasn't been tested in the last 5 years, I would consider it basically as not been tested at all, because lab equipment and the technology in the lab, as well as the MVAC, it just changes everything. So, all right, let's go to this next section here.
It was a terrible time for both sides of the family and whoever knew them. It was hard. It was really hard on all of us back then, because our lives changed.
Detective Giannino believes the driver of the van took Barbara and Darlene to the Everglades, where they were assaulted and shot. The crime scene photos show what the remote area looked like when a fisherman and his family found the girls' bodies the day after they were murdered.
I think the sexual assault took place here in this remote area. Whatever transpired afterwards is the big question. Why did it go from a sexual assault to a homicide? It's sad. Two 14-year-old girls to be murdered in such a way, it's just sad. There's no other way to explain it.
Yeah, that's a critical question, and I've worked with enough agencies, and I've seen enough cases that I think the sexual assault kind of a lot of times, the men that once they do their sexual assault and kind of recuperate a little bit, I think a lot of times the realization of what they've done comes out, and maybe they got recognized by the victims. And there's a particular case here in Salt Lake where the guy confessed that he was an apartment manager and the girl lived in his building. And so he realized once he committed the assault, then she recognized him and she knew who he was. So he just said, well, my only recourse was to not get caught, was to kill her. So do you think that's pretty common, Tom?
Yeah, it's common, and it could be the case. It could also be other variables. One I don't want to speak to right now because they're working this on a second offender, and I don't want to hypothesize something out there that might spoil what they're doing, looking for this second offender and what the connections were back in the day. But that could very well be it. It could very well be that area is right across the street from Hollywood High School, still in business today. It's still functioning. As I recall, the Polish American Club was there now, and where Kavako is standing is actual location of where 40th, aka 56th Avenue, crosses Sterling Road, and it's of course more built up than what it was. There was a semi-remote area back in the day, so you could hide, and she was a witness to it. So we're talking about a second offender, and that's the nebulousness of it. At the same time, you have a witness who saw what happened out here. So why were these girls killed? Remorse. I would suspect this. Even back in those days that's in a Rouv or an area where there's a strong Jewish population, very clannish, very tight-knit community that happens out there. It's very likely that these girls were not what they thought. That these guys were grabbing them off the street. They weren't somebody that you could take and just have disappear that was going to create a huge hue and cry, and they probably realized that. As dreadful as it is to say that, it's just a fact of the victimology here. So if these girls had prominent ties to the community, which obviously they did, and if they're into that clannish areas, what I'm talking about is the different things that bond us together as a society, then, those connections are there. Those bad guys realize it. So they're making a business decision at that point. You can't just let them go. They may recognize them, like you said, may be able to finger them later on, meaning pinpoint who they are, the bad guy is, and they're known witnesses to it. And they just had no choice at this point, in their mind, and they had to kill him. But what you don't have is that intimate violence that comes from a serial killer, that upfront and personal thing that happens. They're shot with a .45 is what reported historical records over here. I think that still stands true today. And I'm sure the firearms guys looked at that. And that's a less connective sort of distancing yourself from the murder itself. And then we have this purported second offender. And I'm going to assume that that's Gail, and that's not a second DNA profile, but it could be either one of those things. We just don't know. And we're both out of the club, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But, one of the things that really perplexes me about this is a lot of times after a sexual assault, if they're killed quickly, then the bodies are just dumped. They don't. But these girls were fully clothed when they were found, and so if they were sexually assaulted, why would they be fully clothed? Is a question that, as I watch the video and see pictures of the crime scene,
there's some ambiguity in there, because the initial reports say they weren't sexually assaulted, and then later on, probably post autopsy, they said that one of the girls' underwear was on backwards. So that would lead me to think that there was something going on there. And then Rob comes right out and says that. So there probably was, like I said, there was initial report, and that's just the way things were back there. And people were a lot more glib. They were less constrained in their opinions. And so, we spoke about victimology on this, and this is a case where, don't go hitchhiking. And this may be the one that caused the end of hitchhiking in South Florida, because there was no hitchhiking really. As we got older, it was the end of it. So this could very well have been the case that did it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go back to the video here.
Senseless, actually.
And you can see possible blood evidence on it too.
Meanwhile, the results from the BSO crime lab came in. They revealed a major breakthrough in the investigation. A full DNA profile of a suspect was developed.
Getting a full profile from a suspect with a case that's almost 50 years old, it is rewarding.
At long last, the name and face of a suspect emerged.
That profile, through our DNA analyst and our crime lab, was able to identify a Robert Clark Keebler. His history included armed robbery, sexual assault, aggravated assault, from California to South Florida.
Robert Keebler. What do we know about this guy?
Yeah, not much. He does not show up in public records very well, and even some of the historical accounts and the pay-for services for the various news services. It's not a lot of profile on this guy, and they have an advantage with NCIC. I could dig a little bit more to find out exactly what he was arrested for, things like that, but at this juncture, we don't. So he does not have a lot of reporting on him. But what they reported on that is the robbery, the sexual assault. They don't parse out if those were separate events or if it was a crime of opportunity. And I'll categorize off of that. There's generally 4 types of rapists that are out there, but one of those is that opportunist, or one of those is the poor impulse control or variants of it, and they see, they want, they do, and just that's what they do. They're mentally depraved, and they've just got that evil within them, and we just don't know. But as you walk these things back, South Florida is just, there's tons of them. There's tons of violence that exists in that area as well. I'll add this, as long as I'm speaking on that right now. Every time we get a win on this, every time we solve one of this, we claw back a little bit more of humanity, and we put a little more fear into those who would do evil without sounding melodramatic. But those business decisions that happen where you think you can grab a girl off the street, or girls in this case, and get away with it, are over with. The golden age of serial killers are over with. And now we have another tool or workers and tools out there to stop this. Well, that stops those people who are on the bubble, and they're just have that ilk to walk to the dark side. They're not going to make that other path. And this puts the fear of God into them. And I said I wasn't going to get melodramatic, but I don't think I can get any less than what I just said there.
It's critical for people to understand that their choices have repercussions. And the fact that in some jurisdictions around the country nowadays, their bad acts don't have repercussions, which is why you see such a dramatic spike in all sorts of different crime in different areas. You see Nordstrom's, moving out of San Francisco because they've been robbed so much. I was reading an article and said, I believe it was Nordstrom, their total profits are down 25%. And they operate on pretty small margins anyway. So you've got these businesses that are getting just wholesale robbed. And the biggest problem is they're not being prosecuted. I mean, especially with facial recognitions and all this kind of thing, is they know who these people, they know who a lot of these people are, and they could crack down on this stuff, but they won't. And therefore, it's human nature. If you're not being punished for something that you do something wrong, and especially if it's profitable to the individual, and the individual has no repercussions at all, that's why you see people walking into a Walgreens or something with a garbage bag and just start shoving it in. Well, that's a pretty low level case, but that will escalate. So anybody that is not being punished for something that they do individually on a small scale, that's going to just, it's basically rewarding them. And so they're going to do more. People will do more of whatever you reward. Well, these people that create even the more heinous crimes, where you have the assaults, the sexual assaults and the homicides, they have to be held to account. And like you said, Tom, every time the bad guys hear about somebody, a case getting solved, and even if it's a year old or 50 years old, eventually they're going to get caught. And hopefully it's within a time frame that they can also be pay the price for this. But society in order for society to actually function properly, it has to have repercussions for individual acts that go against the societal norm. And I think you're right, Tommy. It's just one of those where, you know what, this guy got caught, and hopefully there's people taking note that the next time they get some kind of an urge to grab some girl off the street, maybe this case will come to their minds.
Yeah, 50-year later case. So there's people reading this, they're wondering when the axe is going to fall, and it's just not the lightning strike of being able to find them with the DNA that's now down to 3 to 5 skin cells, maybe as much as 10 are needed. That's nothing to get this with that quote touch DNA. But the other thing is it emboldens people who are potential witnesses. And when you work these historic, or this overused term of cold case homicides, if you work these things or you take a look backwards on these, and there's a big movement to do that in the agencies, and there's a big outcry to do that from victims, it encourages those people who are would-be witnesses to come to the other side now. And all you got to do is approach them, and they know that that's out here, and they do not want to be involved in a conspiracy all these years later where they covered that up. albeit, a 2 years or 50 year. They've had to live with this, and they were romantically involved with somebody or a family member, and they covered this up. And, they had a change of personality. And that's when things change. So this is a tremendous tool, not only just because of that lightning bolt effect, but it encourages people to come forward on this stuff because we're going to find it with forensics.
Yeah. And it's interesting also that people, if they know there's not going to be a prosecution and this person's just going to be right back out on the street, the chance that they'll cooperate with the police just plummets. And so, but on the other side, if people know that, hey, if I help the police and this person is prosecuted and gets put away, then they're more likely to cooperate and to help. And so the prosecution, which is ultimately being held accountable for your decisions, and when perpetrators and just outright criminals are caught and prosecuted and taken out of society and off the streets, it benefits everybody. So, all right, let's go back to the video, man. This is such an incredible video. It's out of Broward County Sheriff's Office, and you can go to their YouTube channel and see this. And the link is going to be in the comments. So here we go.
Robert Keebler died in South Florida a few years ago. Before the results of the DNA testing, there was never any evidence of him as a suspect in this case. The question now for Detective Giannino and why he needs the public's help is finding the connection between Robert Keebler and Barbara and Darlene.
We're trying to figure out how and if their two universes would have crossed paths back in 1975. It's difficult to reconstruct the past that's 48 years old. If anybody remembers Darlene and Barbara, anything about them, anything about what occurred in June of 1975, associations, friendships, I asked them to give us a call. It may mean nothing to them, but it may mean everything to us.
All right, so it's absolutely critical. Anytime that that people have information, and like you said, Tom, the opportunity to, relationships change, circumstances change, people remember things that maybe they were afraid to come forward in the past, but if they have any information now to help solve and make this connection, then that's it's absolutely critical to do that. So, okay, last part of the video that I want to hit is right here.
And it's likely, Detective Giannino believes, that another male was involved in the crimes as well. Investigation on that part of the case is ongoing. Anyone with information is asked to call Broward Crime Stoppers at 954-493-TIPS. Tipsters may be eligible for a cash reward. With other dead women found in this same general area in Broward and Miami-Dade counties around the same time as Barbara and Darlene, Detective Giannino says the DNA hit on Robert Clark Keebler is a significant development.
We're looking back at all of the other murders that took place out here to see if there is DNA evidence to tie him into those cases.
Yeah, just to wrap this thing up, boy, it's just so amazing that when a case that's almost 50 years old is solved, and it's a double homicide, and they think there's connections with other people, with other there's other suspects they're looking for, and we're going to put in a graphic here that shows some of the other murders that happened in that general area back in the 70s. And so, if anybody has any information, especially about all of those other homicides that are unsolved, and maybe there is a connection, maybe there is enough of, as Tom was saying, there's so much violence that happened back there in that Hollywood area back in the 70s that there were a lot of gangs, a lot of, and not the gangs that you would think of now, but it's more of the motorcycle type gangs, that feel at least. And just incredible that we have a breakthrough that might actually lead to more of these homicides being solved. So, all right, guys, hey, it's been fantastic. I think we lost Tom, but he's working remotely and so may not have really good internet connection, but just an amazing case. Again, I want to congratulate all the Broward County detectives and even those folks that worked this case back in 1975. If you guys are listening to this and any of you or know any of those investigators, they did it right. And it was just incredible that they were professional enough that they did that, and they got it all in. So amazing stuff, and we love it. We love that the MVAC was so involved in finding this DNA profile off of the victim's clothing. And again, congratulations to all those guys. So kudos, and hopefully this helps the victim and the victim's families and friends to start, the healing process, because at least these two girls have now a little bit of closure and a little bit of justice. So, all right, guys, appreciate you listening. Again, subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss an episode, and we will talk at you later. Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.